warm welcome to everybody today afternoon to Influence Healthcare webinar. We are very excited today to have a great panel and to discuss a topic which is, everybody is living through, which is the impact of COVID in various ways. But today we want to specifically get into and discuss what has been the impact of COVID from an operating point of view, a technology point of view, and therefore what have been the financial and cost-related, changes therein, how long they're going to last, etc. And we've got a great set of panel here to discuss this with. Let me do a quick round of introductions to the panelists, and we can take it from there. We've got Mr. Ratan Jalan with us. Mr. Jalan is the founder of Medium Healthcare Consulting. He's one of the most respected healthcare professionals in the country and is widely regarded as a rare thought leader in the healthcare arena. As CEO of Apollo Health and Lifestyle in the 2000s, Mr. Jalan was a pioneer in creating some of the most innovative healthcare formats. Things we take for granted today have become commonplace, like the Apollo clinics, bringing diagnostics close to your home, or indeed the boutique birthing formats, which took on the form of Cradle later. So, very, very happy to have you here with us, Mr. Jalan. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
We have Dr. Rajiv Singhal. Rajiv is the Group CEO of the Care Group of Hospitals, one of the largest hospital chains in South India. He's also a managing director in the Evercare Healthcare platform of the TPG Group, which incidentally also owns Care Now. Rajiv graduated from AFMP Pune and has extensive experience in running healthcare enterprises, including in the past with Ruby Hall, Fortis, and Sakra, and now, of course, Care. Very warm welcome to you as well, Rajiv. And of course, last but not the least, we've got Rohit. Rohit is the co-founder and managing director of the Cloud9 Group of Hospitals. Rohit is one of the youngest healthcare entrepreneurs in the country and has led Cloud9 to become one of India's largest birthing and pediatric chains with presence in the south, west, as well as the north of India. Rohit is also the recipient of many awards, including the ET and Business World 40 Under 40. Rohit, very, very happy to have you here with us.
Likewise, thanks for having me.
So let me jump in. Let me jump right into this topic of ours today, and what a lot of us are living through every day, which is what has COVID done to volumes for healthcare enterprises. I mean, we've seen since April when the lockdown started, there was a sharp hit in the volume. They went down as much as 80-90% in some cases. Some hospitals running at 15-20% of pre-COVID level numbers. May saw an improvement. June is improving even further on May. It looks like some of the healthcare demand is back. Of course, there are lots of changes and differences in how it is coming back. So some of the questions are, how have volumes been trending for each one of you during lockdown? Which revenue lines have been impacted more than others? Have some improved while others have come down? Do you even see them coming to normal levels going forward? Let me pose this to Rajiv, to you first. How have you seen this pan out in the last 90 days?
Thanks, Nitish. I think unprecedented. There is no parallel in the history when we look at those 90 days, and I think none of us on the panel have a vague memory of any event which would have created that kind of impact which lasted for so long. Rest everything was a short duration of time. And as you rightly mentioned, it was like you got up on 22nd or 23rd of March and you suddenly realized in next 3 days, you dropped your occupancies by 70-80%. No one could imagine that this is something which will happen. And the worst part was nobody could actually predict how long this is going to stay. So that was the beginning of the things. Now the other part is, although the businesses started coming back to normals in various forms, shapes, different diagnoses, people working under different environment, but we don't know whether this 90 days will extend to 9 months or it's going to go beyond a certain period of time. So I would say period of uncertainty, but times where we should reevaluate ourselves, recalibrate, and come out with something new for the healthcare to serve the people at large. Yeah.
Rohit, how's it been with Cloud9 and what's been your experience on the volumes?
Yeah, well, Look, I think just to get the first part of the question on this, Nitish, I think what was the biggest uncovering of truth, if I can say, during this time is, a lot of us had to go through this because not because of any fault of ours as a known, right? It wasn't anybody's individual fault in terms of what the occupancy level fell to. And
Correct.
that opened up the entire scheme of unpreparedness, if I can use that word, right? It's again not just from us, but the ecosystem at large. I think everything that all of us have been speaking about theoretically about, the public infrastructure, the spends, the access, the affordability. I think all of that this was Hail Mary, I suppose, right? I mean, all of this unfurled and we saw it becoming what it is, and I guess all of us are casualties in what actually followed. Um, with us specifically, I think, look, emergency services were obviously allowed to function, and at least with us, Cloud9, 70-75% of what we do is treated under emergency, which is childbirth. We didn't have that harsh an impact, I think, to what the rest of my colleagues have actually, suffered through during this time. But I think what did happen was, obviously the experience goes for a toss in terms of how you have to look after people, how you have to look after staff, how you have to make sure that, you don't become a source of contamination. I think those things played a crucial role, which, maybe we'll get through in some of the other parts of the discussion on the cost implication of something like this. But I think volume-wise, we had, if I can split it between outpatient and inpatient, I think outpatient was like a complete disaster till everybody had to figure out how to, bring that back. But given that, outpatient is something which is more of a programmed visit rather than an emergency service, I think that did take a hit. Other than pregnancy, I think everything else related to it. So, for example, we have a high volume of fertility that we manage across the country. So that went to zero because not just April, I think somewhere around, if I remember right, I think mid-April was the call taken to ensure that all the elective cases as such be put on hold to reduce the load as such, right? So I think that it was the right decision to have taken by the industry at large to ensure that we again minimize the risk of too many people coming into contact with each other. So fertility went down completely, and I think pediatric also went down completely.
Yeah.
And one doesn't realize when we say OPD and all the added layers of OPD in terms of engagement, the lifetime value of the customer, all these things suddenly become a huge question mark as to, you in good times, you really don't bother much about, where is what trickling what, right? I mean, what are all these connected points? But suddenly, in a time like this, everything becomes extremely transparent and you know where what is hurting. So it's been a great learning curve for us. I think we've tried to be as innovative as possible. I think we were able to turn around a lot of things very, very fast. Again, I'm privileged for the fact that we don't do too many things. We do very few things and we want to do those things very, very right. So I think that has helped us. I'm sure Rajiv will have a lot more to say, but it's been all right. It's been all right.
If I may add on to that, for both you, Rohit and Rajiv, have you seen an impact on pricing that you are pushing forward to your patients? Has that changed? Is there an up and down, or is there an ask in the market to change it? How have you seen that play out?
No, well, not really. But I think the one thing which has gone up is, the cost of consumables is a given, right? I mean, it's a fair, transparent thing again. The cost of PPEs as we speak has been coming down. I'm sure Rajiv will also concur on that. I think initially, I think, it was, I mean, what do you do? Everyone wanted to make the best of it. I think the cost of some of these PPEs were abnormally high. That all of us were procuring at as well. I think there was a discussion about NPPA trying to bring it under the ambit. It didn't happen. Probably that would have helped. But I think the first thing to actually solve for was to make sure supply is there more than the pricing. So I think once the supply is in, I think about late last month, end of May or suppose, I think the price has rationalized quite a bit. But one needs to understand it's a whole other complication. I can give you our own example, just dwelling a quick minute into it. When a particular, I don't like to use the word patient, but when a patient is admitted, what happens is people don't realize that if we were allowed as a directive to test every patient for the probability of being an asymptomatic carrier or symptom based, if they are COVID carrier, then the ability to work around it is far more greater. But what happened is, I think across different governments, different things between ICMR, there was a language mismatch between and or. You won't believe this. There was a language mismatch between what the government was saying, and finally resulted in the fact that, look, please don't test anybody before admission. You just, admit them and do what's needed. Which means that, we have to treat every single admission as an infection case, right? What happens is there are at least about 8 to 10 people minimum as caregivers during the process of an admission in a hospital, right? So which means that during a visit, all of these PPEs, which most components of the PPE is disposable, which means it's not reusable, it has to get built. People don't realize that. People say, oh, why is this being charged, right? If we could have had a clear directive and appended at the first to say that please do the COVID test, that the government had fixed the price, do the test, and maybe then you can rationalize some of these. But unfortunately, there are too many perspectives being drawn. But other than the consumable cost, I don't think there's anything which has been translated onto the customer cost, customer pricing, at least from our point of view.
So, Rajiv, how's been your experience? I mean, there are these two pressures on pricing, right? I mean, costs are going up because of compliance or infection control for COVID, and people are saying, "Well, I earn less, so I need to pay less." So those are, and that's a generic consumer behavior. How's been your experience on this aspect?
So, Nitish, I'll basically start with a very different dimension on pricing. We are living in a country where nobody cribbed and complained when the liquor excess cess was increased by 70%. Did you find anybody complaining about it that I am earning less and I would like to pay less for buying that liquor? No one complained. People were standing in line for 6 hours, 7 hours to pick up that bottle of liquor. So my only point is, as I keep saying, that recalibrate. People have to start thinking about that they have to pay for quality. They have to pay for the better healthcare, and people and media and rest of the society should stop criminalizing the healthcare for charging. What are you charging? You are charging the cost of a consumable which is for the safety of the people. And you are paying 70% more for the liquor, which is proven that if you have liquor, your liver is going to burst, and still you don't complain about it. Such a crazy situation. So I am saying it is high time people should stop saying, are we charging more? I think it's a very relative term. One, charge for your services which you deliver and ensure that you maintain the highest levels of quality, and whatever is the adequate price, please charge it. Don't profiteer. Don't ensure that there is a transparency on your charging component. I think I would say charge right. Charge for your service. Less or more is a relative term. We should get away from the system, are we charging more? I would say we should charge right.
Interesting. That's a great perspective. Let me quickly move on to Mr. Jalan. Mr. Jalan, let me ask you a question let me put on a layman's hat. Healthcare is accepted and is an essential service. But how does 70% of demand of an essential service evaporate overnight? Where do those 70% patients go? I mean, we saw demand not being there in April, so we know there's electives, non-electives. Well, fair enough. Maternity may not have been impacted, as Rohit was saying, so much. But what happened to all the critical cases? Electives can be pushed out, but that's just 1%. What happened to all the crowded OPD areas, people who used to come to consult doctors? Where did that all go? I mean, and are we seeing something more than just a temporary COVID impact? What is this telling us? You have a wide spectrum of discussions you do across the board. What's been your take on this?
I think two things. One is, my guess is, if you are talking about chronic care, and you have millions of people in this country who suffer from diabetes, hypertension, asthma, and stuff of that kind. Now, those conditions, even if you ignore for the time being, or if you postpone, they don't prove fatal overnight. So you may not see mortality, you may not see deaths, but would that essentially lead to worsening of the situation? Yes. So I'm just saying, I'm sure Rajiv I mean, if you're talking about these patients who, for whatever reason, lockdown or otherwise, had to postpone even the outpatient visits, my guess is we would start seeing the impact of this, which certainly is going to be pretty negative. And if you look at the numbers, cumulatively is going to be a huge impact. I think we're going to see some of that in times to come, but it's very unfortunate. But the other thing, Nitish, my guess is that, like, let's say if you talk about things like angioplasty and a whole lot of the other procedures, my guess is that if a whole lot of people didn't come to hospital in the last 3 months, and forget the elective procedures like knee replacements and other things, or cosmetic surgery or whatever, then what happened to them? They didn't die. You don't hear news about millions of people dying because they couldn't go to the hospital. I think what we need to introspect, that was some part of the volume which we used to get not really necessary. So I'm just saying it's not whether it's 5% or 10%, but the certain procedures which were happening in different hospitals, were they actually necessary, or let's say they happened for, within quotes, partly commercial reasons, or partly, let's say, and I'm just saying somebody just managed to counsel the patient, the relative. So I think there are these two things. Chronic care, my guess, we're going to see the impact, and we also need to examine that, was all that happened with COVID, was it the right thing to have happened? So I'm just, are we seeing some correction there, and the right kind of correction?
Go ahead, Rajiv.
So I just want to take on, you got a very interesting point where the heart attacks, and after working in two prime cardiac stories, like previously in Escorts Heart Institute and now working in CARE. So I'll give one very different way to what Mr. Jalan said. One is very clear. If I look at the entire number of angioplasties which can happen, only few percentage of angioplasties are primary angioplasties when guy actually comes to the hospital with a chest pain. That is one way to look at. So those things, now whatever is the reduction, that is something which is not in our hands. The guy has a chest pain, he will drive to your hospital. That is part one. Now other extreme is what was being discussed, is that what happened to my elective procedures. Now it's a scientific debate. There are two ways to look at it. The multiple reasons why the longevity has increased is because we are able to do early interventions and prevent people dying from those critical events where people would have died otherwise. Okay, so that is the another way. If a guy comes, you have a TMT positive, there is angiography, and still I would again say 10% in any science is something which always will gray area, whether he required or it was not necessary. That is something I would leave for people to decide. So I would say primary plasties constitute less number because of the way things are happening. The elective procedures have definitely dropped down, and we expect the electives to come back. 10% will always be subject to, I would say, evaluation, clinical audits, and rightly so should be done to ensure that we are on the right side of the law and on the clinical ethical path.
So one of the things that all of us struggle with right now and over the last 2 months is to say, and it's a very human question as well, right? Is to wonder, when will business come back to normal? I mean, Rohit is fortunate, like he said, some of the demand related issues, at least on the inpatient side, have been lesser on the maternity areas. But everybody wonders, when will I be back to close to 100%? We are very happy because we have gone through the milestone of making huge losses to coming close to not making operating losses, to now, in a lot of cases, not having operating burn. But you are a profit-making enterprise by design. So you have to wonder what the future is going to look like. So when do those lines start to merge towards normal? Will they ever be? Will some of this demand just go away? Are we looking at 6 months? Are we looking at 2 years? What's the guesstimate as of now as to when we come back to, let's say, what January, February numbers were across the board?
Nitish, this is question to me?
Yeah, go ahead, Rajiv.
Sorry. So, Nitish, when the numbers will actually fall back, I think it's anybody's guess. But the only green shoots are from, I'll call them green shoots because there's a very critical aspect today, which is important. And I use the term which I've started using in these times, saying healthcare industry is not only a mission of saving lives, but also saving livelihoods. Because you have, like in our organization, we have 10,000 people, their families who are dependent on the survival of the organization. If the organization survives, the jobs will survive. And then there is indirect number of people, whether it is pharma, consumable, device, and other whole lot of people who are dependent on the healthcare industry. Somebody has to start viewing that the survival of this industry is very critical for direct and indirect employment of people across the country. That's part one. Having said that, my guess is if I look at what the things are, the elective ones may take a longer time. A guy may not jump into a joint replacement for next 6 months because everybody still carries the fear of COVID, whether I'll get infected, why should I go to the hospital? But what is happening, the demand for the critical care is increasing. The respiratory illnesses are increased. So your hospital is getting filled up with these kind of ailments. So the pattern is changing, which is filling up your occupancy rather than the routine stuff. Anybody can live with hernia or a gallbladder or a joint replacement, but rest of the things are making. So in our initial 2 months, you will be surprised to know that we had 24 H1N1 cases in our Hyderabad hospitals. So there is a COVID, there is H1N1 also which started happening. Now dengue will come. So I think the revival will come. My guess is another 3 months we should be able to reach the numbers where we are able to survive and pay salaries to the people in a respectable manner. That would be my first guess.
Yeah. Mr. Jalan, any thoughts on this, on where we are headed in terms of revival, or even in coming back in any time soon? So some things which are like really badly hit today, OP, clinic-based format, dental, nobody wants to really, dental is the easiest to push out, etc.
I think two things. One is what Rajiv mentioned, that the patient mix in terms of, let's say, conditions may change, okay, and may change significantly. And I completely see his point of view. The other thing we need to really examine is that, I'm just saying there's a whole lot of talk about international medical travel. I'm just saying we're not going to see patients from other countries for a long, long time. Now, the question also is that would there be a significant shift in domestic travel as well? I mean, if today Rajiv, let's say, and Rohit, fortunately caters more to the local population, but if you have people coming all the way from Calcutta or Northeast to, let's say, Hyderabad for cardiac treatment, etc. I'm just saying, under these situations, for a foreseeable future, my guess is that people would be, little more reluctant to travel long distance. And to that extent, we will have to see that if that's a sizable number, then how do we manage to make up for that loss? I mean, that to me is pretty important, because what you're saying is that, let's say you have 15-20% the people who are international travelers, then you have another 25 to 30% people who are coming from long distance to your hospital. Now put together, this is a huge number, at least for quite a few of the last couple of hours. So that's something I think we need to figure out, how do you address that lost opportunity, if I may say.
Interesting. Let me move on to something we were talking about in terms of volume, while we're discussing volumes, which is on changes in the way we operate, and the impact of that on costs, changes in the way we use technology. I mean, COVID has caused a lot of pivoting across industries. I think the latest big name change pivot was Starbucks deciding to do takeaways and delivery. But you see that across industries. Are we seeing any fundamental shifts in healthcare? I mean, it's a given that some costs will go up because additional PPE is being used as an instance. That's a given, and you have to work towards compensating that margin. But are there any fundamental changes in the way we operate, the way we look at delivering healthcare, the way we look at optimizing, increasing efficiency, or paying our, managing our costs, whether it be for personnel, consultants, procurement. Let me start with you. What's your take? Have you encountered some of this in your area or others that you've seen over the last 3 months?
You're asking?
Yeah, go ahead, Rohit. I think Rohit is on mute.
Oh, sorry. Hey. So the way we've been going about it, Nitish, is we always have projects coming up through the year. So for us, we had to try and go back to the drawing board and say that, if this was a challenge which is going to happen with a far more, let's say, frequent periodicity, and you get challenged, what are you going to do about it, right? So I think healthcare infrastructure in general, I've been speaking to a lot of people, and I've been hearing wild, claims as well in terms of trying to disconnect some of the most connected parts. For example, people are talking about keeping the lab and scan separate of the main facility, whereas fundamentally, when you think about it from a cost amortization, it makes sense to have everybody in the same place, but to give the ability for a continued care and also to keep people at a social distancing is probably not the right word, but to still keep them disconnected while connected in the experience, right? So people are also thinking like that. I think one other big thing I think a lot of good hospitals will do, even in existing infrastructure, is to try and repurpose some of the existing infra, right? How soon can you convert into like a holding area? How soon can you block off a section? How soon can you, make isolation? If it is 1 bed, can you make it 10 beds, overnight without really having to make a fuss about infra, right? I think those challenges are, I think it'd be good if generally addressed, because we don't know when this is going to come again, what sort of wave is going to come. I think those are definite challenges. You're absolutely right about the cost. I think the cost, whatever is the incremental change, like Rajiv mentioned, it's not about profiteering, but the fact that there is a cost increase is a given, because everybody wants to be safe. Now, you don't want to go to a hospital and get infected with something else that you went hoping that you don't get it, right? So safety is priority. Quality will go up, right? So in terms of all of this, how can people afford it, right? So how does that pricing translate? Which means, can managers of healthcare organizations look at lesser revenue lines for the next 18 months per se, with a higher cost impact, right? So what do you do for something like that? And I think the most important thing is, how are you going to harness technology? I think one thing that we've all seen is the huge uptick in terms of how people have actually come about and adopted. Would love to go deep on that later on, perhaps. But I think that has been a crucial, let's say, positive impact in the overall scheme of how technology has been used to provide, healthcare access. In our country, like Mr. Jalan also said, I think our country was always a problem of access versus affordability. While affordability gets spoken a whole lot about, I think we have to solve for access, and that only technology can help us solve, right? So I think these will come in different parts, and not just for operators like us. I think even small time operators, big chains, I think everybody has to go back and see how to try and use this situation to see how we can become more agile, I suppose.
Great. Rajiv, same question to you. Where have you seen costs change fundamentally? Increase, decrease? PPE is obvious, it's increased. Have you seen costs change? The biggest cost items obviously are consumables, consultant payouts, nursing staff, technical staff, your operating overheads. How are those going to behave going forward, or are you seeing significant changes in them?
So one changes, I would say, changes both ways. And when I'm saying change both ways, like this is a time where we would like to recalibrate your cost and relook at your cost and saying, should I be paying for this particular service this much? That is one. So you have to realign people. This is the best time where you can make and force people to think that what should be the ideal appropriate cost for this particular service. And we are doing it. And we are having those conversations with certain set of people. At same time, there is certain amount of money you will have to pay to the people to ensure that there is a continuity of service, especially for somebody like critical care nurses, critical care team. This is something which you have to invest into so that you have to have the right talent. You don't miss out on that talent. So it's a cost adjustment both ways. Some places you have to revisit, third component is nobody today can take anything for granted in the cost, because otherwise, I'm sorry to say, some people started thinking that the price is given for them. If I have to hire a consultant at a particular, it was a given cost. Today, people have to think that because there is an accountability, there is a question of people can afford those kind of costs. So that is also very important parameter in trying to reshift the cost base of it. So I would say consultants, nurses, material is something which you and me have a very less control, think on what we procure and what comes into it, and the operational efficiency. So I would say these are the 2-3 important levers on the cost piece, and requires continuous revisiting every time, every month. It's a super dynamic situation. What you and me are discussing today may become obsolete after 15 days if you sit over it. Yeah.
Absolutely, that makes a whole lot of sense. Sorry, please go ahead, Mr. Lal. Please go ahead.
Nitish, let me carry forward what Rohit mentioned. I'm just saying that the model we have had so far in this country is that you have a large hospital and everybody comes to the hospital for everything. I am saying you have the work from home becoming the biggest phenomenon in today's world. Is there a treated at home phenomenon? So I'm just saying, are we seeing home becoming an important place, in the whole equation for, let's say, healthcare, number one? Because what I'm thinking about, if you look at banking for that matter, banking today has a distributed service model in a manner of speaking, that there's so much you can do sitting at home or anywhere with your cell phone. Then you have an ATM, then you have a bank branch. I am saying, are we talking about some services which a person or a patient can avail of at home? Are we talking about clinics or primary care? Are we talking about ambulatory care? Are we talking about tertiary care? Because so far the model has been whether primary or secondary or tertiary, for everything you come to the hospital. So I'm saying, will this crisis, somewhere give a push for that kind of a model, which I think is there in a large part of the world. I'm just saying, in India, unfortunately, we just don't have organized primary care / secondary care. So you have thousands and thousands of doctors practicing in their clinic. You have nursing homes which claim to be, let's say, decent or not so decent secondary care. But are we actually seeing, or shouldn't we be seeing, a shift in that direction?
So one of the things interesting that you mentioned that is that the government really helped, right? COVID caused them to make online consultations on the OP model, and issuing prescriptions far easier in the end of March when COVID hit. Do you see that as one thing which would be mostly at home via your phone going forward?
No, it would. So I'm just saying today what people are talking about, because even Mr. Modi talks about some 120 million people downloading Arogya Setu and how that would become the bridge for teleconsult, or let's say somewhere keeping medical records and stuff of that kind. But I'm thinking that I think there are possibilities which can go beyond that. And you have to see the new healthcare scenario more, a lot more than teleconsult. Teleconsult is one thing, but that's a very, very, it's a small part of the overall solution.
Nitish, sorry, just want to add on the cost part. This is more like a introspection question for all the ones listening to this conversation here. Is one of the things we ran a small exercise actually. It's it just occurred to me. In the line items of cost, which is typically what you look at it in a situation like this, as to understanding, okay, what are all the costs that we can trim? We found a very peculiar thing. It may be true to some organizations, may not be true to all. But, nobody really understands the cost of hiring, from a cost of letting go to a cost of rehiring. Nobody has done this exercise, right? A cost of rehiring is typically way higher than cost of retention. We've seen that. And I'm not talking of the doctors and all of them, right? In terms of all your large workforce of nurses and all others, people really haven't thought about, what's the cost of rehiring? How many people are involved? Time involved, the kind of monetary expenses involved, and the kind of price that you bring someone back on, as against being able to retain a particular employee in terms of being able to motivate them, give them a little extra, and make sure they're part of the goodwill story, right? Somehow that's not been a thing that everybody has focused on. And if you look at attrition across healthcare pre-COVID, right, it used to be high 40s and it was acceptable. Why? Right? So this was something that we tried and introspected and found some amazing results, and which enabled us to say that okay, you don't need to hire, but you need to actually retain a lot more people in terms of how they're doing, right? Performance being on par, right? But I'm just giving a larger statement. Mr. Jalan, the other day when we spoke, I should have told you this, but it slipped my mind. But it just occurred to me. It's a very interesting thing, actually.
Yeah, right. And so, see, Rohit, if you talk about nursing, unfortunately, in this country, there's certain attrition rate it just gets perpetuated. It's like nobody takes it as a problem.
It's acceptable.
30% of nurse leaves every year, and I think that's not so. Nobody has said that why can't it be solved?
Yeah.
Do you see this changes that we are seeing in the operating side, compliance costs, some of these interactions with people, etc. Rajiv rightly mentioned, some of the fixed costs are fixed costs, and some of the variable costs cannot be taken away in a hospital, like your consumables costs, etc. But you have upward cost pressures for sure, and as demand, still catching up, I'm sure there will be the classical economic impact of pricing going down with the financially weakest people. So, are you looking at margins still being soft for the next few quarters, even if demand returns, or is that not a worry for you?
I think margins will be under a lot of pressure because there is only limited amount of cost you can push on to the patients, because again, we all know that you have only the entire pressure comes on the cash paying patient, because you can't change the insurance segment, you can't change your credit organizations, you can't change the contractual obligation organization. So at the end of the day, the man who is basically paying out of the pocket, and that is the biggest debate in the world, is the one left out, and his pocket is again put under pressure. So I think until as the payer model changes, and this particular segment of the patient is the one who's going to run away, because he's getting impacted, his income is getting impacted, because rest of the people, if they are covered by various schemes, either they are in the job because he has got an insurance cover, the retail insurance is as such very low, or he is part of a credit organization or a PSU. So this particular segment will thin out. Moment it thins out, and also coming back to you're one of the bigger payer segment for the international market. So if your cash paying international market and your cash paying domestic reduces, margins will be put under pressure in times to come without any doubt.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Let me quickly just ask everybody, and feel, anything feel free to jump in. Where is technology in all of this, other than minor incremental changes? One big shift is obviously using technology for the OP stuff. But is there going to be an adoption of technology to ease any of the older problems in healthcare now? I mean, healthcare has been notorious, let's face it, for being a laggard in real technology adoption across the board. How are you all thinking about it?
I'll take that first. So, Nitish, we like to classify the whole technology piece into three important components, which we call it as the 3P. Basically, the 3Ps is process, payer, and people. Right? You heard Rajiv, Mr. Jalan also speak about these, in various contexts. But one thing is always, going in a different direction, and none of these were connected. Like you also mentioned, the telemedicine guidelines came 4 days before the lockdown, or 5 days, or within the week of that lockdown, right? Now, you cannot wait for a pandemic to tell you here's how you need to do, right? Now, this was debated for ages.
Yes,
if only you had opened this up and said, guys, please innovate. It could have been a very different context altogether, right? So I think this, I mentioned about the whole preparedness aspect, right? I think this while it's good that they mentioned this, and we've seen that there is a whole lot of development already happening on something like this, despite being an unstructured way in terms of how healthcare works in our country. It's not like the developed markets where everybody uses the same software, the same sort of coding paradigms to ensure data is all written in one way. It's all going into one place. No, it is still unstructured. While there are blueprints, while there are enough mechanisms being told to say that it's going to come, I think again, taking reference from what Mr. Jalan said about the financial system, I think this was a great opportune moment to kind of unleash what the UPI movement did for payments, right? I think that was sorely missing in healthcare, if you look at it, right? From UPI, if you look at it, the amount of digital currency that has happened post the UPI doing what it did, I think this was, in some way that effort is happening now with the whole Bharat Health Stack, and, a lot of people being invited to try and understand what the stack can take. Arogya Setu being one important example in that, about being able to access information in one place. But I think overall, from a process, payer and people, I think this is important. Still on the process, I think payer, last week when IRDA said, guys, please include telemedicine as part of your reimbursable expense, right? Now, some of these things should ideally happen hand in hand. Now, you know that now if government is saying something, why can't the other department proactively say that, guys, this has to be there, so that people know that if I need it, I'm actually in a position to use it. Again, like Raji said, albeit it's not a great penetration of insurance across the country for us in whatever form, corporate, retail, anything, right? But the fact is that, some of these things, I think the narrative should happen. The narrative should happen at a far lesser interval, so that, people can then actually try and do well on it. The last important part, people, I think, look, being part of this for the last 14 years, I can tell you technology is aplenty in healthcare in various forms, be it across engagement, medical intervention, diagnostics. There is a plenty, but I think the people, when I say people, it includes the users, it includes the consumers, it includes our doctors, it includes the paramedics, everybody, right? Consumers, you, me, all of us, we're very happy using our phones and everything for whatever it is. And as soon as we come to a hospital, we also forget that, I can ask for a similar service. We are all okay to, step out of it and say, it's fine, it shouldn't be like that. Consumers should come and ask you, hey, why can't this be a continued care, right? I think that happened. Providers started doing that themselves during this time. And I think doctors, was a brilliant that every well. And I don't know what's Rajiv's experience, but we had like a fantastic experience. There were days where we were doing more video consults than physical consults, and we were able to unlock value. Like Mr. Jalan said, video consult and telemedicine is probably just the stepping stone to what the unlocking of value can be. We had mapped out the entire engagement system, so which meant that if you have if you have an intervention after that, be it a lab test or a pharma delivery, how can you ensure that it all happens seamlessly? So we worked with a lot of the startups, the Dunzos, the Olas, making sure we can provide these seamless connections. And we were able to do it because we can do this API exchange, because all the technology is our own. But you still needed people to use it. You still needed people to use the platform, to talk about it. Our most senior consultants came onto the platform, started using it. I think that was fantastic. Where are we today? Like I told you, from March to now, I think we're now settling at about 20% in the overall volume in terms of how technology is being used in video consult as such. Sorry, but pre-COVID, to give you the number, we were at less than 1%. So it is still a huge improvement, but it's still not that great. Right?
There's some ways to go. Ravi, what's been your experience of this?
So, Nitish, again, technology is something which we as a healthcare providers have failed to use the manner in which it should have been used. We are only using to make certain bits and pieces of our own life comfortable, then the patient's life comfortable. We have to start thinking from the consumer perspective and ensure that today, if you go to any healthcare operator, everybody is working on a HIS and the financial system so that my number should be right. That is my first priority. But the priority should be, how can I engage, as Mr. Jalan said, consider home as a treatment place, and whether I'm able to, using technology, able to give that comfort and connectivity at home and take away a lot of stuff from the hospital. That's part one. Second, I think this COVID crisis has also taught us that a lot of things are happening in isolation. The time has come where the healthcare technology has to come as an integrated platform. So I think some people have to start talking to each other and come with a robust solution and saying, I am there to literally map the patient journey, complete 360 degree. So I think the integration piece is something which is missing. Time has come where we need to integrate, utilize technology. We all had a good experience with the teleconsults, but that is again the first step towards technology, but I think miles to go.
Mr. John, any perspectives on technology adoption and what shape and form it is taking or could take using this opportunity?
Area which Rohit hinted, which I think is a phenomenal opportunity for healthcare, is to essentially engage with, and I wouldn't even call patient, I'm saying engage with the relevant community. Because, I mean, if you engage with them when they are sick, then you are seen as somebody who is trying to push services. But I'm just saying, if you engage with them at a larger level, then you are actually able to build a very different relationship. See, as a consumer, something which really surprised me, you have this book my show. I mean, you essentially, book your movie tickets, but if there are no movies, then where is book my show? And to my surprise, and it was such a pleasant surprise, that in a scenario where their essential business model does not even exist, they actually are finding newer and newer ways to keep on engaging with the clientele. So I'm just saying, is it necessarily a revenue making model for them at this stage? No, it is not. But are they able to earn substantial goodwill? I think they will convert. So I'm just saying that today, I mean, let's say Rajiv, in a year, you would have had, let's say, millions of outpatients and other people. I'm just saying, if you wanted to engage with them through technology, it actually costs very little. For whatever reason, I'm just saying we have hundreds of pressures on us all the time, so we don't think of those kind of things. But if you do engage with them, I think, I'm just saying, does it really help you build your credibility, build goodwill? Because what you said, Rajiv, in the very beginning on price, I think more than price, it is price perception. So I'm just saying, my guess, Rajiv, is that in Hyderabad, if there are 3 hospitals and all of them charge 30,000 rupees for angioplasty or angiography for that matter, the way the price gets perceived for 3 different hospitals would actually be a function of what is their broad image. So I'm just saying that this is one opportunity which I think is, I mean, can do wonders only if people are willing to adopt it with all enthusiasm. I mean, there's no point doing it in a very, what do you call it, tactical and in a token kind of fashion. No, then you actually are not working on it.
That's a very interesting point. We have no time, but it's a very interesting point. If you marry those 2 points, you can book a lot of stuff on your phone, but you can't really do too much with a hospital. UPI will change the way we make payments, but yet people stand in lines in hospitals to pay bills even today. So yeah, hopefully this will change that. I'm conscious of the fact that we're running out of time. We did get a few questions from participants over emails over the last few hours. So I'm just going to request Kritika to pose those questions to the panelists, and we can maybe take a couple of them before we need to break there. So Kritika, over to you.
Thanks, Hitesh. Hey, hi everyone. So I was actually looking at, I think a lot of the questions that have flown in from a lot of our attendees, a lot of them are in a similar vein. These are smaller hospitals, singles hospitals or smaller clinic chains, who are basically asking the question of, you know what, we have obviously faced a lot of stress, 70%, 80% of our volumes are gone, and no idea when they'll come back. Do you all have any inputs as to how we manage our cash cash reserves during this time? And I know we sort of touched upon it from our own individual perspectives during the panel, but because I think multiple questions came on this, so it would be good to get everyone's perspective on the same.
Rajiv.
Okay, so I can understand the pain and the challenge, because trust me, the point is the pain is same for smaller or the large hospitals, because the larger hospitals have a bigger cost base than the smaller hospitals. So I think the degree of difficulty and the degree of pain is more or less same. That's part one. So again, the way everyone is looking at redefining the cost base and also coming out with a different business model. One thing is for sure, what was relevant pre-COVID may not be relevant during this time and the times to come. So it is important that we revisit every line item of our business and ensure that whatever was considered as a flab, please shed it today, don't wait for tomorrow, will be the scenario. Do not put too much hopes on basically the debts or other structure, because you don't know when your money is going to come back. So don't take unnecessary burden on your head. Only take what you can deliver. Be conservative. Don't go aggressive. And as Mr. Jalan made one very important point, which I would like to re-articulate, stay connected with your community. People who used to come to you, please give them confidence to get your business back.
Interesting.
I also think, Nitish, that these are the times when a small hospital, let's say in a smaller town, should in a way behave like a big hospital. Now, let me explain, I'll take a second. If hygiene and safety is the concern, then a small hospital in Allahabad or Vijayawada, wherever, should look at, let's say, protection and protocols for safety of the people and the patients exactly the same way as a large hospital does. Because the problem is the same. So you can't say what they do because they are big, and what I do because I'm small. No, that won't work. The other is, this is the opportunity for you to be able to convey that I'm in a way more capable than what you used to think of me. And obviously, I'm not talking about meaningless exaggeration, but my view is this is the right time for a small hospital to reposition itself.
Interesting point. Everybody assumes that if you're a smaller hospital, you are disadvantaged. But you have a great point. I mean, fighting COVID is the same, irrespective of the premises you're standing in.
Absolutely.
That's a big confidence booster or a confidence reducer today. Yeah.
Thanks for that. Again, in the interest of time, I think we can just cover perhaps one other question, and then we can close it. And this is to all the panelists here, including you, Nitish. The M&A, or if you will, the growth, inorganic growth market, right, for hospitals, large or small, was a certain way pre-COVID. People were looking at and focusing on certain things. The question is, now that the lockdown has come and gone, what do you see from the market, or individually? Are you all looking at growth opportunities or investing in growth? And if so, is the strategy in terms of what you all are looking for changing, really?
I think Nitish should answer. He hasn't answered one more question.
My point is really simple. I mean, you got to go to step one here. You expand capacity when you expect a lot of demand in the future. I think sitting here and now, everybody today at least has more capacity than demand, and in that scenario, we're not certain where that's going to go. I mean, look, at any point in time in healthcare, there's always been investment in new healthcare, but that's on the basis of new demand coming in. I don't know at all where this will end up, but sitting here and now today, I have not seen too many people being brave to put no investments in any healthcare infrastructure for sure. I don't know, Rohit, even Mr. Jalan, if you.
No, so the,
No.
no, so the question to Rohit, related question, Rohit, would you have some early data that during COVID more people got pregnant or less? Because that would decide Rohit's future growth strategy.
I'll come to that, Mr. Jalani.
His smile says the answer, in fact.
No, it's actually very interesting just to cover that point. We've actually seen that people, so typically when would somebody come and register for a service with us is, as soon as they've completed 1 month of pregnancy, right? So there's a delay in their menstrual cycle and hence they come and register with us. What we've seen, at least during April and May, was that people came in later stage of pregnancy. They still didn't venture out despite knowing that they may have been pregnant. We saw a dip in registration, but people have come back and, they're in a later stage of pregnancy. Consciously, they've stayed away and then come into the OPD service a little later. I think it's too early to see if, if there's going to be a boom or a downward spiral in that. But so far, it's been pretty similar in terms of, the trends that we had seen year on year, what really happened. So I think it's a little too early to take a call on that. I'm hoping it's a boom. But let's see. On the M&A, Nitish, interestingly, the number of feelers that you're getting from various, operators have increased,
Yes.
if I can say that.
Yes.
While these feelers may not be a direct indicative of deals probably happening, but I think they've been largely indicative of people trying to understand that if there is willingness, are you guys looking to do this and all that, right? So, at least in our scheme of things, I think we're seeing a lot more conversations happening. Will the yield? I'm not very sure. And like Rajiv also hinted, I think in this COVID era, a week is like a month, 10 days is like a half year, right? So you really can't, it's very fluid. So I don't think we can, put a pin out there to say something like this will happen, but I would expect that in about 6 months' time, we will have opportunities. When I say we, I think a lot of people who will probably, let's say, come out of this faster will see a lot of consolidation opportunities. Is my
No, I agree with that. Consolidation, absolutely yes. New investments, I think are a little bit on a pause right now.
Sure.
Yeah. Consolidation, absolutely. Yeah. Mr. Jalan, any thoughts? Crystal ball gazing on when pan private healthcare we might start to invest in creating more capacity, or we are good for the next couple of years. You think?
I would love the government to answer that, no, Mr. Jalan, at some stage. Abhi to karo yaar, kuch to.
Rajiv, the honest answer is I don't know. I'm just saying, you have all kind of hypotheses and by learned people. So there are people who say the world is going to be the same again pretty soon, and there are people who say it will come to an end. So, you have all hypotheses by learned people. So if you ask me, the answer is I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's about sums it up. So, conscious of time, we are just nearing 4. That's about the end of our period. Kavita, we can maybe take the questions one-on-one later.
Sure.
Later on. I had a very engaging discussion. Mr. Jalan, Rajiv, Rohit, a big thank you to you for coming in here today. Really appreciate your thoughts and insights. Wish you all the best as you navigate these COVID times. You guys are in the front line of, the highest risk. So I'm sure you heard this before, but from our side, everybody else, kudos to you, and hope to catch up soon. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.